What's one tip that you really should know if you're reclaiming your sexuality after violence, sexual violence, or abuse? I'm here with Lauren Shay from LaurenShay.ca, and I'm Kathy Vartuli from theintimacydojo.com. And Lauren, you're a professional sex positive counselor. Like, what's the one tip if someone came to you and said, I want to reclaim my sexuality, I've experienced sexual violence or abuse, what's the one thing you would tell them to focus on first?
I think if I had to choose one thing, it would be to find ways to reconnect with your body. The body contains all of the wisdom that we need to reclaim our sexuality and to be able to be more embodied in our sexuality and in life in general. So it's, reconnecting with our bodies, it can look different depending on what the relationship with the body looks like now. But seeing a somatic therapist can really help with that, but you don't need a therapist. You might want to look up online Sensate Focus, which is an exercise that supports people to be really present with touch. And there are a lot of different ways that you can explore your relationship with your body at home, on your own, or with a partner.
That's beautiful. And so I have an abuse background, and it was really challenging because I know that also because I've read it, and like I dissociated. I I felt like I lived above my head because being in my body didn't feel safe. So yeah, I love that sense of focus. Lauren,
I just want to speak to that dissociation is one of the most common impacts of sexual violence that survivors find themselves dealing with. So it's one of the topics that I'm going to be addressing quite a bit in my talk is how to work with dissociation.
Yeah, it's really challenging because it's so effective if something horrible is happening, you don't really want to be present. It's actually a great coping mechanism.
That's right. It's actually a survival strategy that helped you to survive, in some cases emotionally and in some cases literally, physically. So it's there to protect you and it serves you in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, when we are, further down our road of recovery, and we're ready to heal our sexuality, which is often actually, the deepest level because it's the site where we were actually hurt. That dissociation and that coping strategy of not being present doesn't help us anymore. So so I explore how to honor that strategy that has kept us safe while taking healthy risks to allow us to take incremental steps to being more present with our sexuality while we're resourced and have as much safety as possible doing that.
Because you can actually re-traumatize yourself if you try to go too fast. Like it can feel overwhelming. So
absolutely. And I think it's really a balancing act because you don't want to just, jump off the deep end when you're not resourced and you don't have what you need to contain that experience. But a lot of survivors actually find themselves in the situation of really avoiding sex and a lot of sexual situations, which unfortunately that also doesn't help with reconnecting with your embodied self. And so there's a middle ground, which is, it's like rehab of anything where, we don't tell people to go from 0 to 10, but, stay between 1 and 3, take small steps and process what's happening as you do.
I love that. It's beautiful advice. Lauren, how did you get interested in, this is very tough work. It's very challenging. How did you get interested in helping people with this?
Yeah, so I've been working in the anti-violence sector for a long time. I worked with several of the Stopping the Violence program agencies. I've done crisis phone line work. I've facilitated support groups. I worked as a counselor for those programs, and those programs are really so wonderful and so needed. And one shortcoming that I maybe saw of the anti-violence nonprofits is that they're really set up to support people who are kind of coming out of that immediate crisis stage. And it makes a lot of sense why those programs are geared towards those people. So when you're really in the first stage of healing from trauma, what you need is just stabilization. So it's all about, as much safety as possible, how to avoid triggers. And I think that in some ways that approach did a disservice to women who were further along on their journeys. And so something that I was seeing is that women who were expressing a desire to be sexual again, there was kind of a lot of stigma and judgment, especially with sexual abuse. People thought these women are trying to reproduce the abuse. And when there had been domestic violence, there was a lot of fear that, women who were, expressing a desire to be sexual were going to call domestic abuse back into their lives. And so, I was really seeing that, that women who were expressing these desires weren't quite getting the support that they needed. So that's kind of what inspired me. I started from this anti-violence and trauma-based background, but seeing that gap really got me to start studying sex therapy and sex education, because I saw that there was a need.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful, because you really do need a lot of safety and stability initially, but for me, I had to find someone and say, it's okay, you can do this, and I've got your back, and kind of encourage me to take the scary risks, because otherwise it was really easy to stay in the shell.
That's right.
And I wouldn't have all the pleasure and delight in my life. So, wow, thank you so much for doing this work.
Thank you. And, even though, there is this quality for a lot of survivors of staying in their shell, what I've seen is that miraculously, even though, they've been through so much, that desire to be embodied and to express their sexuality, it usually stays intact. It's usually there, and it's usually strong despite the trauma.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I studied traumatology for a while because I was experiencing it, and I'm a geek. So, and Dr. Robert Scare talks about this experiment where they have little chicks in there, and they would put them in water and see if they could swim, how long they'd survive, and they'd pull them out. But the chicks that had no trauma were pretty good, and the chicks that were really traumatized and not allowed to heal, they would go under really quick. And then, but the chicks that had traumatized and healed were actually stronger. They were more resilient than the ones that were even not traumatized. So I love that. Like, we can reclaim so much, and we can find ourselves again and actually have more understanding than we might have otherwise, because we're really looking at all the dark recesses of ourselves. So I'm really excited about your talk. So is this the first time you're speaking at ConvergeCon?
Yes, it is.
That's
I'm
wonderful.
very excited.
I love the conference. Why are you excited about talking at ConvergeCon?
Well, I know quite a few of the presenters and have so much respect for them. So I'm really excited about Little Wu's talk because, everything she touches just turns to gold.
Oh my God, interviewing her, I was just like, oh my God, so grounded and so present.
I know, she's the best. And Cora Bilsker is someone who I also have a lot of respect for, and I think that her talk about, allyship with other women rather than competition is so needed. And,
I cherish her doing some amazing work there.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, and I think that is an issue that, none of us are completely past.
We're socialized to compete with other women versus like, hey, that was great. Can like work together. So yeah, they pick some really, like, I've always loved ConvergeCon, but the talks this year, I'm like, oh wow, some of them running at the same time. What am I gonna do?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm very stoked.
yes. Well, it's only a few days away. I'm currently packing, between interviews, packing for the trip. So I will see you in a couple days, and I really appreciate you taking the time out. If you're watching this and you have questions or comments, please leave them below, and I'll see if maybe we can get Lauren back to answer them. So, Lauren, thanks so much, and I'll see you in a couple days.
Thanks, Kathy.